sometimes we don't know it's the wrong goal until we've started after it, because there's no way to know until you've gone partway down. And all of a sudden you get partway down and you're like, oh, holy moly, this is not at all what I thought it was. And going to hit the goal just to hit the goal is a stupid goal.
Fair.
If you know it's not where you really want to be. Now, sometimes we say that because we get scared, but that's back to true accountability as reflection and saying, are we scared because it's unknown, or are we scared because we've had enough other experience to say, this is not where I want to be?
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. One year ago, we launched The Business You Really Want, and you have made it clear which conversations matter most. Gwen, oh my gosh, I'm still kind of reeling from the understanding that we have been podcasters together for a year now. But what I'm really excited about is our number 3 episode. So this is our number 3 most downloaded episode. So our number 4 got several downloads. This one got in the probably like low 80s. But it is about closing the implementation gap. So this was episode 30. We tackled the elephant in the room that almost every business owner faces, if not every single business owner, which is you know exactly what you should be doing, but somehow you aren't doing it, right? The knowledge is just not translating into action. And Gwen, here's what I want to do with this one, because the last one was nice. We did the recap and then we went deeper into a couple of things. This one, though, I really feel like when I re-listened to it, we only scratched the surface on what is that gap between knowing and doing. And so I'm going to do a really quick recap. And then what I want you to do is I want you to just take us one step deeper and see how far we can go before the end of our time together. How does that sound?
Can I go 2 or 3 or 4 steps deeper?
Yes. I'm trying to allocate as much time as I can for this.
Awesome.
All right. So to refresh your memory, Gwen, so in episode 30, what we talked about was that knowing is not the same as doing, right? A lot of times we go into this like learner addict mode and we think that's action. We think that's business building activity. But knowledge is not the same as action. And something that you said that I thought was really profound and also comforting is that it's actually normal. It's not a personal failing. You're not a bad business owner because you invest way more time in knowledge than you do in action. It's just the nature of who we are as entrepreneurs and what we do. Other thing you talked about is that where we as entrepreneurs oftentimes default to thinking that the reason we're not doing the thing is because we're bad business owners, we're bad people, we're lazy, or whatever adjective we want to throw in. It's really that either we don't know how to do the thing that we really, really want to do. Like we know, but we don't understand the step by step. We lack the energy or the motivation to do the thing, or we just don't have any accountability. We don't have anybody checking in on us in our journey to do the thing. And this is the episode, Gwen, where you defined true accountability as being both two-way and non-judgmental. And your point, like your big point in our conversation was that if you genuinely could do it yourself, whatever it is, you would have already done it. So Gwen, what do you think about the implementation gap now?
All I know is it's real and it's going to exist forever. Like, I don't think anything has changed on it from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a reality. And the more I work with my clients, the more I talk with other people, the more I'm on other people's podcasts and we're talking about it. This is a real thing. And I think it's a part of being a human.
Okay.
It's definitely part of being an entrepreneur, but I think it may be a part of being a human. And I think different of us think about it differently, right? Like you said, the word that we put in about why we're not implementing, I think has a lot to do with, our upbringing and all, all sorts of other things. But I don't think anyone's immune to it either.
Yeah.
I think often we think people are immune to it because they're very actively doing other things, but there's often things that they should be doing that they're still not doing either, or that they know they need to do that they aren't actually doing, right? And so I think this is part of nature, and it's one of the reasons I have gotten so focused, and we really, I'm going to say, have refocused the business. It's not that we actually changed anything that we're doing, but we've changed how we're talking about what I do is really about the accountability piece. Because anyone who says they're self-accountable isn't actually using the phrase correctly. What they are actually is they're dependable, they're reliable, they're disciplined, all of those things. But accountability is a two-way street, like we talked about in episode 30. It's actually a process of reporting and reflecting. And it's not just about, did I do the thing? We have now, as happens with so many words and so many things, we have taken the full meaning and we have condensed it down to a very, very, very tiny piece of that meaning, right? And so we have taken accountability down to, did I do it or not? And if I didn't, I'm in trouble. And that's not actually accountability. Accountability is saying, did I do it or not? And let's figure out what either made it successful or made it not successful. So it's not just I did it, yay you. I mean, that's part of it, but also it's like, yeah, this is a place that you've been working at and you've grown and you've done all these things. That's also part of the accountability process, is that a reflection back. And so not just when you have failed, but also when you have succeeded, right? And being able to say, oh yeah, this is something I can replicate again and again, or I can take this and apply it into this other scenario. And so we're talking now that really my primary focus is helping hold people accountable in a non-judgmental way. Now, does it mean I'm not doing any operation stuff? No, because most people need accountability in their business operations. So I'm still doing a lot of conversation around the business operations, but it's because that's where the accountability needs to be taken place. We've talked about it before that, and you can talk about it better. Marketing has kind of its own self-accountability loop because we get reflection back based on how other people are responding to it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it has an built-in feedback loop.
Right. And accountability really is about a feedback loop. It really is. But like I said, we have shortened it to mean, did I do it or did I not do it? And I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah. Well, and the other point that you made in the episode, I think is important to kind of drill into a little bit more here, because in episode 30, it was very much a new idea. Most people who listened to that episode and reached out to us had not heard this before. And that is that it's not enough for it to be two-way, for there to be another person involved. That other person has to have an investment in your growth, your success, your goal and reaching it. Because if they're not invested, then I don't think they're motivated to hold you accountable. It's too easy to just be like, yeah, whatever. Or we've all had the accountability program that really consists of us filling out some kind of online form. And the question being, did you do it or not? That's how we hold you accountable.
Right. Back to we've shortened it to that. Now, our accountability process, we have them fill out an online form.
We do.
So that in of itself is not the problem. It is about the fact that we take time to read and reflect on what we're seeing. That's where the difference piece is. Back to, it's part of the feedback loop of it, right? And that can be done without being accusatory, without being, without doing it under guilt, without doing it under shame. Actually doing it non-judgmentally is the piece that I think surprises a lot of people when they actually experience it. And I did a podcast episode quite some time ago with Sonia Navarez, and she talked about that she was a little uncomfortable because she was expecting it to have guilt and shame, and it didn't. And she had to also get comfortable with no, she's not actually going to guilt me or shame me into doing anything, because my answer always is, I can't make you do anything. I have no control over, I mean, we really don't have control over any humans. You have small humans. And I know that you will actually say this, that even though you potentially have as much control over another human as anyone, you also know you still do not have control over another human. But so much so, more so when, it's not family, it's not any of these other things. I can't make you do anything. You have to choose to do it. But I can help you figure out how to get past the learning and into the doing, how to get past the decision and into the action, how to get past the starting point and get out of the blocks.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the jerk question here, because I do that, right? Because I hear all sorts of stuff. And so my first jerk question is, but if you're not showing some type of judgment, if you're not showing some type of disappointment, how are they ever going to move forward? How do you get them to move forward?
I don't need to show any disappointment because they're already disappointed in themselves. They've got plenty of that voice already in their head. They do not need that voice. If that voice was all they needed, they would have already done it, because that voice is living inside their head all the live long time. Because I don't know any entrepreneur, and I really don't know a whole lot of people who are like, yep, I'm going to see if I can fail today. Like that's like not a thing. I mean, undoubtedly there are people out there like that. But they're not listening to my podcast. I can assure you that this is not something that they're listening to. These are not.
We are not for them. We are not for them.
We are not for them. They have never found me. They are never going to find me. I am not worried about that. The people who are listening don't need that. They've already got that from themselves and potentially other sources, which I'm not even going to try and address, because that's not the thing that's preventing them from doing it. It is knowledge, additional knowledge, not the knowledge that I have, but the additional knowledge. It's the understanding, it's the motivation, and really saying, is this the right thing? And so it's not about, I have to force you to do it. It's understanding, so what is keeping you from doing it? Which is a completely different question. What is keeping you from doing the thing? And that's when we can start thinking about it differently. It's like, oh, what's keeping me from doing the thing is I don't know how to do the first step. Okay, well, let's see if we can figure out how to do the first step. Right? What's keeping you from doing the thing? I just really hate the idea of doing this thing. Well, do we need to do this thing at all? Maybe not. Right? Guilting them into it won't ever change the fact that they still don't want to do this thing. If it needs to be done, if it actually needs to be done, let's pick something that they maybe are not wanting to do, but absolutely needs to be done, like file their taxes. Like that, right? Then we start looking at, okay, well, so how can we still get that done with the minimal amount of your involvement? Right? Still needs to be done, but how do we do it in a way that we can still get it done where you don't have to hate it?
Yeah.
Right? So it's really not about, I need to make you feel bad. I need to force you to do something. Because I think most of the time that we're actually not taking action on things is some combination of not really knowing the additional pieces, or not really being motivated to do it for good reason. Right? And so maybe we just toss it out.
Okay. So to that point, if you're proposing that they just toss it out, how is that accountability?
Because we've reflected on whether or not it was something they really should be doing in the first place. So I'm not saying we get to toss out everything. Like I said, you don't get to toss out not paying your taxes.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
But you do get to toss out, I'm going to post on all 5 major social media platforms 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
right? Someone told them that's what they need to do and that was going to make a difference. And it's like, yeah, it would only make a difference if that was actually motivating for you and you could actually do it consistently. It's not actually going to do anything other than make you feel guilty and have you less productive in everything else you do. So let's reevaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying don't post on anything, although that could be an option too, but let's reevaluate what actually needs to be thrown out.
Yeah. So, because I'm thinking, the reason I asked that question is I'm thinking back to your interview with Sonia on her podcast. And, one of the things that she had talked about is, she spent a lot of time dreading the process because of her fear, right? It's like rejection sensitive dysphoria, like her fear of what you might say to her. But then there was also this feeling of regret, remorse of picking the wrong goal. Because as she got deeper into the accountability process, that's when she was able to recognize through your two-way conversations that what she was doing was not really what she wanted to be doing. And, the consistent action was going to get her to a place that she didn't really like. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of people out there who offer accountability, but they hold you to that goal, like very rigidly. And so I can imagine that there is somebody listening who's like, well, if you give me permission to change the goal midway, that can't be accountability.
But it can if it's the wrong goal. That's the piece that's tricky and why it has to be a conversation, why it actually has to be reflection, right? And why it can't be just a checkbox. Because sometimes we don't know it's the wrong goal until we've started after it. Because there's no way to know until you've gone partway down. And all of a sudden you get partway down and you're like, oh, holy moly, this is not at all what I thought it was. And going to hit the goal just to hit the goal is a stupid goal.
Fair.
If you know it's not where you really want to be. Now, sometimes we say that because we get scared, but that's back to true accountability as reflection and saying, are we scared because it's unknown or are we scared because we've had enough other experience to say, this is not where I want to be?
Yeah.
And back to reflection. You've got to have somebody who can actually reflect with you on that.
Yeah. So as you're saying that, I'm smiling because I'm thinking back to, I don't even know what episode number it was off the top of my head, but when we did the live 531.
Oh, when we did this with you, I still love that episode.
Yeah, that one. Oh, yeah, I don't know that I love the fact that lives in posterity, but no surprise, it's not in our top 4 most downloaded episodes, okay? But during that time, one of my goals, I think it was my 3-year goal, was I wanted to work 20 hours a week, right? So that's the goal I'd set. And that had been a goal that I had set a few years ago, right? Working toward just 20 hours a week. And as I started making some of the shifts that we concluded I needed to make in order to get there, I realized that it's not that I want a true 20-hour work week. I just want a time-bound limit to my work week. I don't want to be client-facing for more than 20 hours a week. I don't want to be working on a deadline for more than 20 hours a week. I am actually quite content working 35 hours a week if those 35 hours aren't all FaceTime.
Right.
And
but back to, you couldn't quite get there until you got down the path to realize, oh, that's not exactly it. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's a complete retraction of the goal, but sometimes it's just a modification of the goal. And yours, I would consider a modification, not a complete retraction.
Yeah, well, and it just gets me to thinking about, the profitability piece, right? Somebody comes in and their goal is, usually it's more profit, right? But they first think it's more revenue.
Right.
And so they come in, they want more revenue. And this is something I've seen happen several times since we started working together, where they get to the end of the year and they feel disappointed because their sales are down. And yet every time sales are down, and I'm just going to let you finish this, what is up?
their profitability is up. Because we've been taught that income, sales, revenue, whichever word you want to use, is tied directly to profitability. But that is not true. They are related, but they are not absolutely parallel related. That if the income goes up, the profitability goes up. It is possible for the income to go down and the profitability go up. There's a point that will no longer work.
Right.
That doesn't go on forever. You can't do it forever. But it is making assumptions that may not be true. And whenever we're setting goals, we're totally crystal balling. We're guessing. It's always a guess. No matter how good we are at setting goals, it's always a guess. Because there are so many things out of our control. See previous episode. But
Noted.
But we're making a guess. So allow it to be a guess, not a proclamation, not an absolute. And because the same thing can happen on the other side, that the guess is, I want to do X, and we like instantly get there. Right? And it's like, okay, well, that wasn't really a goal. That was just an activity I needed to do. And all I needed was to define it that I just really needed to do that activity. Right?
Not only was it just an activity, it wasn't even a 13-week activity.
Right. It was just, it was a relatively easy activity. I've just been avoiding it. And, you talked about that sometimes things get put off long enough that when you actually get to them, they're way bigger in your head. And it was like, oh yeah, I thought this was going to take like 3 days and it took like 2 hours. Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's, thinking back to the 531 episode, I had spent so much time wanting a 20-hour work week that I never stopped to ask myself, A, do I still want that? Or B, why do I want it?
Right.
What will it get me? Right. And so I thought that was really interesting in this idea of how accountability plays into that. Because I think accountability plays into our success way more than we think it does.
It absolutely does.
And
it absolutely does.
And your definition that requires outside perspective, I think, is also new information and 100% correct and important, because going back to the idea of the business owner who is depressed because their sales are down, I don't know very many people who would look at their numbers and point out that profitability was up. They would stop at sales being down. And I know this because I had a conversation. I was in a group of 6 businesswomen, and it was right after tax season. And one of them was practically in tears. And she's like, I think I'm going to have to close my business. I had my lowest year ever. I've never had sales so low. And everybody was like, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. And oh, the economy, and oh, the this, and oh, the that. And only because I work with you, not because I'm brilliant or smart or anything. I said, well, but have you looked at how much you paid yourself? And
I love that you're able to do that, because, and yes, you actually are brilliant, but I do know I've gotten your brain asking different questions than it used to, but you are brilliant.
Right. But it's funny is because since I've started working with you, stopped looking at I still look at how much revenue I made.
Oh yeah. Because it's still an element.
Right. I first look at how much did I pay myself, and I compare that to the last few years. Because if I made less this year than I did last year, but I paid myself more, I'm happy, and I'm not setting any goals based on revenue. I'm just like, okay, how do I keep this? And if I made more and paid myself less, I know I got a big problem.
Right. Well, or that I'll say it's a piece of data.
Yeah, it's a piece of data.
Problem.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a problem. But you have to be really aware of what is that telling you.
Mm-hmm. But my point, Gwen, is not one woman in that room had looked at how much she paid herself compared to the prior year.
Yeah. See, accountability, thinking outside, looking at it from a different perspective. And part of the reason we talk about outside perspective is when, we've used this phrase before, when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label. You can't read the label from inside the jar. I mean, it's a true thing. And often folks are trying to get perspective from other folks who are either in the exact same jar or in similar enough jars that they can't actually see the label either. Right. I've had folks say, oh, well, my spouse, my sister, fill in any sort of close friend or relative is my accountability partner. And it's like, yeah, but they also have their own agenda that's closely related to you.
Yeah.
Right. No matter what their best intentions are. Right. They do. We talk about that you help hold me accountable, but you've now been in the business long enough that it's not an optimal accountability partner for me. We each hold each other accountable within the team, which is, useful, but you get benefit from the business. And so you've got a slightly warped perspective, of it because you are one of my contractors. You also have been in it long enough that some of the things that we probably should be questioning are not necessarily getting questioned just because it makes sense. You helped make the decision. So of course this decision makes sense, right? Not that you're a bad person, for heaven's sake, that's not even close. But because you also work with lots of other clients, you still have enough outside perspective that provides. But generally another employee in the business, particularly someone who works for you, does not have enough outside perspective.
So this is true in marketing too. So one of the biggest things that frustrates me to no end, and it frustrated me when I was working in, higher ed, especially because, everybody wants to be new and different. They want to do the newest thing, right? In higher ed at the time, everybody wanted to go viral, but they want to be new. They want to be different. And in order to figure out how to do that, they're looking at their peers. So they're looking at what all the other universities are doing and they're going, well, let's do that. And let's do that. And it's like, but that's not new and different. That's just copying somebody. And so what I did, early on in my career is I just started looking in other industries. And that's how I even found really like online business, is because I started looking at email marketing and some tactics that they were doing in email marketing to think of how could we apply that into public higher ed? Could it apply into private higher ed? How did that work? And that's what allowed, the university I was working for to actually do new and different things. And to, taking this back to the clients we serve and I think part of it, and it's not something you talk about a lot as the marketing professional on this team, I would say you don't talk about it enough, is that you have eyes and experience into close to 50 different industries.
Yeah. Over my career, which has been fairly long at this point. And because most of my career was in some form of consultant, freelance, whatever, in a given year, I was not in an industry. I was usually, even if I was deeply embedded in a particular company, I was still usually embedded in 2 or 3 different industries. Again and again and again and again and again. And so it does allow me to look at things with very fresh eyes. The phrase that came to me a number of years ago when someone said I was an out-of-the-box thinker is I laughed and I said, no, I just know what is in everybody's box.
Yeah.
I can look at something and say, oh, this is sort of like this, but not quite like this. And so here's, what if we applied this? And it's like, no one's ever done that. It's like, no, actually, there's people who do this all the time and have been doing it for decades, just not in this industry.
Yeah. And that is something that I think if people thought about it long enough, they would recognize how important that is. And they would ask different questions of the people they take courses from, the people they hire. But so often, I still see like, you can trust me to help you. I'm going to use marketing examples because that's my life. You can trust me to help you get to 10,000 email subscribers because I got to 10,000 email subscribers.
Right.
Right? You can trust me to build your health and wellness business because I am a health and wellness professional.
Right.
Or I've been working in the health and wellness space for X amount of time. When what you might need is actually somebody who works in an industrial industry to help you figure out, like, how can you be different than other health and wellness professionals? Yeah. What else do you think we need to talk about when it comes to accountability, the implementation gap, that difference between knowing and doing?
Well, where you just went, I think is a really important place to go is I think that's one of the problems with the implementation gap is, and I'm overgeneralizing here, but most of us are getting our knowledge through books, some sort of a conference-like environment, not necessarily a conference, but, and when I say that includes workshops and trainings and, all of those kind of things. So books, some sort of conference-y sort of environment, virtual, in person, I don't care. Or possibly, like YouTube videos, Google search. These days we're starting to get information from AI, but all four of these have the same issue, which means they're pulling from existing knowledge.
Yep.
Right. And so often the implementation gap comes back to my favorite phrase. Yes, you know it. Context matters. If you've watched more than one episode, or if you even watched like our pre-trailer where I say context matters 8,000 times in 40 different outfits. Yes. Context matters. And so just because you have a health and wellness business and they have a health and wellness business, and you're even offering what appears to be the exact same product, that solution they have doesn't feel right. I'm going to use the term feel in this case, that it's more of an instinctive thing. So you know what to do, but it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Right. And I think that's another place where this implementation gap comes in. And you don't know how to get from I know this and what I feel and how to reconcile them.
Right.
And sometimes it's because your feeling actually is completely right. And the thing that you need to do is nothing like what they need to do. Right. Or what they have done. I work with a number of businesses that technically on the outside look awfully similar. Awfully similar. These typically are product-based businesses because they're easier to look similar, right? But they look very, very similar. I am never talking to the owners of each of these businesses about the same thing at the same time, right? Because their context is different. Even though generally they have a lot of the same problems, right? But it's because it doesn't feel right to them, or they've got this slightly different nuance about it. And the nuances can be small. The nuances can be the difference between I own this building and I lease this building. Right? Even if they're leasing it's the exact same square footage and they're selling pretty much the exact same product. Those nuances can make a difference. And so sometimes that's where that implementation gap comes in, is there's this nuanced piece that's hard to get in any of those other environments. You can't get the nuance in a book. You rarely can get the nuance in a, convention, workshop, whatever kind of training. Sometimes you get a little of it. You can definitely not get the nuance out of AI, even though they're like, oh, but it's my own personal GPT. It knows everything about me. No, it does not. It is not even close to knowing everything about you to be able to deal with the nuance. And I lost my fourth one. Books, training, AI.
Courses.
Hardly ever able to get to the nuance, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where that accountability piece to say, let's help reflect on what is the nuance that is between knowledge and implementation. Because often that's really the only thing that's in the gap, is the nuance. The nuanced difference between what I know and what I feel and know. And how do we get across that gap? And back to, do we actually need to get across that gap?
Yeah. So based on that, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you in the last episode, which is, of everything we've talked about, what are the 3 things that you want somebody listening to take away from this episode if they take away nothing else?
That no matter how disciplined, how responsible, how whatever words you want to use around that, everybody needs accountability, because accountability is reflection with somebody else who cares and is paying attention. When you're looking for real accountability, so that was one. Real accountability takes some outside perspective and some experience. You can't be accountable to someone who really doesn't have that much experience, because they can't help you get past this nuance thing that we were just talking about between the implementation and the knowledge gap. That knowledge to implementation piece takes more experience than I know one way. Because when it doesn't fit the one way, then they're not very useful for you, right? And the third thing is everybody struggles with the implementation gap. Everybody struggles with it. I mean, I'm really good at doing a whole lot of this stuff. I struggle with it too. It'd be a total lie to say I don't struggle with it. The reason it appears that I struggle with it less is because I'm really aware that I struggle with it. And I'm not afraid to admit it and do the things that I need to do to help me get past it. Right? It's the one place that I probably have a superpower, and I think a lot of it has to do with age, quite honestly, is I don't beat myself up over it. I say, oh, this is really a problem. Huh. How can I get past this thing? Right? And usually it is some version of accountability that gets me past it. But I don't beat myself up over it because I do think it's the nature of being human.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Gwen, this is so good. I am really glad that we spent the time focusing this particular episode really on the accountability piece, because it is so different from what a lot of people hear. Also, because if nothing else, like what I hope anybody listening gets out of this episode is that beating yourself up definitely is not the way to get yourself to do a thing. Even if you're sick of yourself, even if you're sick of, hearing yourself roll the same goals over and over again, like there's no good that comes from that.
Because like we said before, if that was going to work, it would have already worked.
Exactly. And so here's what I would love is I would love if you are listening, I would just love your take on accountability. Does this resonate with you? Does it not resonate with you? Because I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about accountability in this way, but maybe you are. And one way or the other, just email me at Tonya@everydayeffectiveness.com. So that's TONYA at everydayeffectiveness.com. And I hope you will stay tuned for our next episode where we go to our number 2 most downloaded episode of our first year as podcasters. All right, Gwen, we are on to the next one. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.